Good afternoon, Rabotai. We're continuing with our Mishna Yomi, Masechet Berachot, Perek Bet, Mishnah Daled. Just as a preface to the Mishnah, we know that ideally a person who is reciting Shema has to make it easy upon himself that he should have the proper kavanah when reciting it. However, there are certain situations where the Chachamim allowed a person to recite the Shema even though it's difficult for him to concentrate. And the Mishnah starts out like this. האומנים קוראים בראש אילן בראש הנטבח, מה שאינן רשאים לעסוק הם בתפילה. אומנים בעלי מלאכות העסוקים במלאכתם, people in the middle of working professionals are in the middle of working. For example, they're either removing fruits off a tree or cutting branches, or he says they're in the middle of a construction work, they're on top of buildings. והגיע הזמן קריאת שמע, the time of reciting Shema has arrived. קוראים את השמע בראש האילן, they are allowed to read the Shema while they're on top of the tree, or berosh hanitbach, or he says they're on the building structure that they're in the middle of building, and they are not obligated to come down from their work area in order to recite the Shema. Which they are not allowed to do where they about to pray Shemona Esrei. And the commentaries explain. The Rav writes like this: even though when these workers are on high structures like building projects or they're on top of a tree, even though they can't concentrate so well because they're afraid they might fall, the rabbis did not require them to go down. The Kriyat Shema because Kriyat Shema only requires kavanah during the first verse. Therefore, for such a minute amount of time to concentrate, the Chachamim said he's not going to be afraid that he's going to fall for those few seconds. Therefore, he's able to concentrate. He can stay up on the platform that he's on, or the tree. Which they are not allowed to do when they were praying Shemona Esrei. Alayev writes, the prayer Shemona Esrei was enacted for mercy, begging God for mercy. Therefore, it requires a lot of kavanah. Chachamim say it's very impractical that this worker, while he's on top of a structure or a tree, can have kavanah for 5, 6, 7 minutes without the thought of falling interfering in his kavanah. Therefore, they require him to come down. And just as a clarification point, the Rambam points out that even though the Chachamim allowed this worker or builder to recite the Shema on the structure or platform that they're on, they have to stop working for the first paragraph of the Shema because we want to show that you have kavanah and you're intending to say the Kriyat Shema properly. That is the end of the fourth Mishnah, Rabotai. We're continuing in Mishnah Hey. The Mishnah now discusses situations where a person is exempt from reciting the Shema. The Mishnah speaks about a newlywed that is burdened with the thought of performing the mitzvah of having relationship with his new wife, and therefore the Chachamim exempted him. The Mishnah starts out, Chatan patur mikriyat Shema balayla harishon, vad motzei Shabbat im lo asa ma'aseh. A newlywed is exempt from reciting the Shema on the first night of his marriage until the following Saturday night if he has not performed the action yet. Now the commentaries, the Rab explains, Chatan, when we say a newlywed, we are referring to Shenasa Bitula. He married a virgin. Patur mikriyat Shema layla rishona, and the first night after his wedding, he is exempt from reciting the Shema. Mishum detarid Shema lo yimatzena bitula, because he is concerned, it is on his mind, maybe he will not find his wife to be a virgin. Vani shamati, and the Rav says, I heard another understanding. Shemitere Shema yaseh krut shivcha bibilato. He's not afraid that he's going to find this girl not a virgin. He's afraid because he has never performed such an act, he might harm himself when performing it. V'tildad de mitzvahi, and since it is a burden of performing a mitzvah, and we know that the Chazal learn out, the Torah says, V'dibarta bam b'shivtecha bevetecha ublechtcha baderech. Chazal learn out, b'shivtecha bevetecha, when you are in your house doing your personal matters, and when you are traveling on the road, doing your personal traveling. However, if you are traveling for mitzvah purposes, or you're doing something in your home for mitzvah purposes, you are exempt. The Rav writes, Rachmana ma'u b'lechtcha baderech, belechet didachu demechayav, ta'ad mitzvah pitirat. that when you travel for a personal purpose, you must stop and recite the Shema. But when you travel for a mitzvah purpose, you are exempt from reciting the Shema. Now the Mishnah says he is exempt until the following Motzei Shabbat. The reason the Mishnah raises as a background, at the time when the Mishnah was written, if you look in the Mishnah in Masechet Ketubot, the first Mishnah discusses that men used to marry virgin girls on Wednesdays, because if anything were to happen, if the girl would not be a virgin, he would be able to go to bed the following morning and complain. Whereas if he would get married on, let's say, a Thursday, he would now have to wait till Monday. We're afraid the girl might appease him and he might stay married to her even though she wasn't a virgin. So since the Mishnah was written in a time when they would get married on Wednesday, the Mishnah wrote you have until Motzash, until Motzei Shabbat. The Mishnah is coming to teach us, in essence, that he has 4 nights, from Wednesday night till Saturday night, including the Saturday night. However, once the 4th night passes, he is obligated to recite the Shema, even if he has performed no such action yet. And the Rav explains, Im lo ba'al ad motzei Shabbat shehem arba lelot tarid. Until the end of the 4th night, he's still burdened. However, misham be'elach libo gas v'tulo tarid. From that 4th night, when it passes and on, he's not burdened anymore because he's already accustomed to his wife. And even though he has not performed the mitzvah action yet, nevertheless, the Chachamim now re-obligate him to recite the Shema. And all this, Rabotai, was discussing about, like the Rav writes, a man marrying a virgin girl. However, if a person were to marry a widow or a divorcee, he would be obligated in Kriyat Shema right away because he's not so burdened. And therefore, he has more of an ability to have kavanah. Just to point out, Rabotai, this is not obviously practical halacha in a sense where you have to first look at Shulchan Aruch, chapter 70, 71, etc., to see the actual fine details. Right now, we are just learning the Mishnah. The Mishnah ends off with an event that occurred. Maaseh beRabban Gamliel shekra balayla harishon shenasa. There was an event where Rabban Gamliel read the Kriyat Shema on the first night that he got married to his wife. Amru lo talmidav, his students approached him and asked him, Lo limatanu Rabbeinu shechatan patur mikriyat Shema balayla harishon? Didn't you, our rabbi, teach us that a chatan, a newlywed who marries a virgin, is exempt from reciting Shema on the first night? Why aren't you doing how you taught us? Amar lehem, Rabban Gamliel answered his students, Eni shomea lachem levatel mimeni malchut shamayim efilu sha'a achat. He answered his students, I am not allowing you to nullify my acceptance of heaven, fear of heaven, even for a moment. Which the commentaries explain. I'm going to read it inside in the Bi'ur. Rabban Gamliel Yeshiv Netanel. Rabban Gamliel answered his students, Shafal pi shechatan patur mikriyat Shema kifi sha'oralem. Even though, like I taught you, that a newlywed is exempt from reciting the Shema on the first night of his marriage, mikol makom rashay ulachmir al atzmo v'likrot im ritzono bekach. In certain situations where he is able to distract his mind from the burden of the mitzvah and focus on the Kriyat Shema, he is allowed to recite it if this is his desire. Ulefikach, therefore, kara Rabban Gamliel Kriyat Shema b'yoto chatan. Rabban Gamliel, even while he was a newlywed, recited the Shema. Kevan shelo ratza levatel me'alav ol mibut shemayim, since he did not want to uproot from himself, to cancel from himself fear of heaven. Afal pi shem alaf shemeikar adin ha'eh patur, even though technically it was exempt. This is how the Rambam explains it to the Perush HaMishnayot. HaMishnah Mevi'ah ma'aseh ze lelamdenu. The Bi'ur writes, the Art School Bi'ur and the Reisman writes, the Mishnah brings us this event, the Lamdenu, to teach us, Shima chatan hu adam gadol, if the newlywed is a great individual, uboteach be'atzmo sheyachol lechaven libo v'lo yetridu machshavotav, he knows in himself, he's able to distract himself from the burden of the mitzvah and focus on the Shema. He has a reputation of being a wise and pious person, in a way where he does not show what he's doing as bragging. Because, Rabotai, if you have a person that's not a pious individual and he comes and says, I'm going to focus my mind in reciting the Shema even though I have a burden of mitzvah, he's making it sound like all other times he does the mitzvah, he for sure has the kavanah. And therefore we know, since most people, it's difficult for them to concentrate, in such a case, they would exempt themselves from reciting the Shema. However, in a case where a person is muhzak as a chacham or a chassid and his actions will not bring off haughtiness, if he wants to be strict upon himself, he's allowed to be strict if he desires. Later on Mishnah, it's going to discuss about a regular person who is not muhzak as a chassid and chacham, if he's allowed to be strict upon himself as well. But that is what Rabban Gimel answered his students. I am going to remove aside this burden of the mitzvah and focus on reciting the Shema. I don't want to cancel my fear of heaven even for a moment. That is the end of the Mishnah. Hey, again, Rabotai, for practical halachot, we must always look at the Shulchan Aruch and the Nosei Kelav, the later Acharonim, in order to discern the conditions, the applications of when we would be exempt and how exactly. Baruch Adonai Le'olam, Amen v'Amen.